what is happening behind the scenes in Tehran, away from the political noise and media glare. In his new book, Iran's Grand Strategy, A Political History, Vali Nasr takes readers on a compelling journey that reveals the inner workings of Iran's approach to power, security, and influence. Drawing on rare memoirs and interviews with key decision-makers, Nasr shows how wars, US pressure, and the region's shifting dynamics have shaped the approach guiding Iran's actions today, where he will offer deeper insights, fresh perspectives, and exclusive analysis from his latest work.
Your Excellencies, distinguished guests, and colleagues, good morning. On behalf of the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research, I would like to start by extending a warm welcome to all of you today. My name is Hajar Raisi, a researcher at the ECSSR specialized in Iranian affairs, and your moderator for today's event, where we hold a conversation covering the book titled Iran's Grand Strategy, A Political History, and we are delighted to have the author himself with us here today. Speaking of the author, Professor Vali Nasr is a well-known political scientist and the Majid Khadouri Professor of International Affairs and Middle Eastern Studies at the Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies at Washington, D.C. Before we begin, allow me to tell you the structure of today's conversation. We will start the conversation with a few questions, basically to give everyone a brief about the book and lay it all out for you. Then we will take rounds of questions from the audience. And it will be back and forth between me and you guys. So I would kindly encourage everyone to join us, as we would like to have an engaging conversation today. So feel free to propose your questions anytime. Without further ado, as I am very eager, Professor Vali, let us start by unpacking your book. Can you take us through it in 10 minutes? What motivated you to write it? And what are the historical identity aspects that your book covered, just to help us understand what your core argument is built upon in the book?
Thank you very Good morning. Thank you very much for that kind introduction, and let me begin by thanking ECSSR and His Excellency for inviting me to Abu Dhabi. It's really, truly wonderful to be here and have the opportunity to have this conversation with you. I've lived in Washington. I've been very involved with foreign policy decision-making, but also academic approaches, not only to the Middle East, but also to Iran. And it's been very clear that, that Iran has become a larger and larger foreign policy concern, not just for the region and its neighbors, but also for the United States. I mean, I don't need to reiterate the nuclear issue, the Syria civil war, the issue of Iran's presence in the region, its allies, proxies, and the policies that it has followed. And then obviously the Gaza war and the 12-day war are the culmination of this, and this happens after the book had come out. But what has always been clear to me is that, at least in the United States and Europe, that the approach to Iran is based on a set of assumptions that have not been tested and perhaps are not true. And in any circumstance with your adversary, you have to understand where they're coming from. It doesn't mean that you approve of it or you sympathize with it, but you have to have a correct perspective of what is motivating with them. And obviously, to put it very simply, Washington has thought, many people think that Iran is driven by ideology. It's all about religion. Because it's led by a cleric and the most important person in Iran has a turban on his head, that he reads the Quran in the morning and then makes decisions, and that it's religion that is driving this. And I always thought that this actually doesn't ring true, because when you look much more closely, yes, they may come from that background, but the decision-making never revolves around that. It's around secular sets of issues. Wrongly, it's all about national security, etc. And I started doing the research on this after I stepped down as the dean of Johns Hopkins School of Advanced International Studies. And there was an opportunity on the other side, which is that despite it being closed in many ways, Iran is also fairly open in terms of dialogue, discussion. There's a lot of material outside in Iran. And there has been an increasing now publication of varieties of memoirs from the Iran-Iraq war onwards, memoirs of decision-making, analysis within Iran about what the country is after, why is it doing certain things, is it successful, has it failed, etc. And interviews. I mean, there's a wealth of material, and interestingly, it became much more prolific after Iran got involved in supporting the Assad regime in Syria. It's both because the lessons learned from Iran-Iraq war and earlier was very important to the way they thought about Syria, but also in way of mobilizing support for Syria. So there was a retelling of their strategy, and is an enormous amount of material in there. And to put it in a nutshell, the picture that emerges in Iran, I mean, I would say it in a sort of high-level way, is that in a way, Iran is not a country that Islam made today. Iran is a country that national security has made. And everything about Iran today is shaped by its national security, the way its economy works, the political system. Even the government's pressure on ideology all these years was not that they needed ideology. In other words, it wasn't that ideology was making the state. It was that national security needs of Iran, in the minds of its leaders, needed the people to be ideological. And you saw that after the 12-day war, very quickly they gave up on hijab. They didn't insist at all. And actually, in my mind, it was very interesting, even when the issue of hijab started in Iran in 3 years ago, when women started protesting. I mean, I remember reading through and listening to the first 20, 30 speeches that the Supreme Leader gave. The word Islam only appeared as an adjective for the name of the state. The only way Islam appears is when he says Islamic Republic. It was all about that this is a foreign conspiracy, Iran is under attack, this is a national security issue, it's not an Islamic issue. He never defended hijab, not once, and still is not coming out defending hijab in that way. So you begin to think, what does drive this man, right? Where is he coming from? What's his intellectual education? And I believe two things drive Iran, and it's now much more apparent. One is that Iran is obsessed with independence, with istiqlal, right? This is historical. This goes to its experiences in the 19th century with the British and the Russians losing territory to them, being occupied after World War II. The Shah was obsessed with Iran's independence. And I start the book actually with a story that when Ayatollah Khomeini was in Paris, the secular leader of Iran's democratic movement went to Paris to make a pact with him, an alliance to overthrow the Shah. And he thought that I'll write a document for Ayatollah Khomeini to sign on to. And he said the best document would be that there would be two principles for the future of Iran. One, that the future government of Iran would be Islamic. He thought that would appeal to Khomeini. And the future government of Iran would be democratic, which would appeal to his followers. And he says that Khomeini, to his surprise, wrote with his hand a third principle, that Iran will be independent. And after the revolution, a Pakistani journalist asked him, well, what's different today with the time of the Shah? He said, the difference is that now all decisions are made in Tehran. And, every country reads its history its own way. Iranians have always been obsessed with being independent, but particularly the Islamic Republic thinks that Iran was an occupied country after 1953, the coup that they believe America brought the Shah back. So they think that they actually won Iran independence, much like, let's say, the FLN did in Algeria. And this has psychologically stayed with them. I mean, still to this day, in the region, against America, etc., it's all about, to them, is about keeping Iran independent. If you actually and you read it in a lot of their discussion, is that if they have one achievement, it's not economic, it's not, in those domains, the one achievement they have is that they are the only country in the region they claim that is truly independent. And it's always about independence from whom? Independence from America. So the way they see America is not just as a superpower, they see America as a colonizer, and they're still in an anti-colonial mode. And that hasn't changed. Even after the 12-day war, it hasn't changed. To them, the 12-day war was sort of the latest battle in this saga. And finally, the Iran-Iraq war was very, very important to them. You saw, probably all of you saw the kerfuffle at the Doha Forum between Iran's foreign minister and the Director General of GCC. There are many, many dimensions to what happened. But when I was listening to it, it struck me that immediately, as soon as it got emotional, the first thing that came up was Iran-Iraq war. Right? And you say that this is sort of on the back of their mind. Now, why is this so important? You could say multiple dimensions. First of all, it was 8 years of war. Probably more than 500,000 Iranians died. The country was occupied for 2 years. It felt completely alone. That Soviet Union, America, Arab countries, Europe, they all supported Saddam. The war was extremely expensive. By the end of the war, by 1989, 2/3 of Iran's national budget was going to support the war, right? And then every village, every town in Iran, every segment of Iranian society was involved in the war. There almost was no family that had not lost somebody in the war. In fact, if you look at Iran's leadership today, all of them either fought in the war or they had a brother, a cousin that died in the war, right? And so it's extremely important to them. And then you would say that when they took over Iran, they were good revolutionaries, but they had no experience in governance, in statecraft. The very first experience they had was with this war. Like, take somebody like Qasem Soleimani. He was a 17-year-old when he led a brigade charge on the city of Khorramshahr during the liberation of Khorramshahr. So his very first experiences in life was in the battlefield. Khamenei became a statesman during the Iran-Iraq war, first as the Deputy Minister of Defense, and then as the president who oversaw the war. His tight relationship with the Revolutionary Guards was formed during the war. I mean, Khamenei, in many ways, is not a very eminent cleric.
On that note, this reminds me of something you said in one of your interviews. You mentioned that he is even more comfortable around, let's say, military elites more than he is comfortable around clerks, let's say.
I think his conception of the perfect leader for Iran is somebody who knows religion and has religious legitimacy, but also knows politics and is capable of administration of government, but also is a national security leader. And he sees himself, obviously, in that genre. But he is much more comfortable, even on meetings when he is actually with revolutionary commanders, than he is with clerics. His most important statements are always with them. And I mentioned this book. There was a very controversial story a few years ago. On the anniversary of General Soleimani's death, he went to visit with his family. And while he was visiting with the family of Soleimani, he got emotional, and he began to say that he remembers a time when he was with the commanders of the Revolutionary Guards, and that he felt as if God was speaking through him to the Revolutionary Guards, which many in Iran said, it's extremely controversial. It's almost like he's receiving revelation. Why? But the more important thing wasn't that. The more important thing is that the one time he thinks God spoke to him was not when he was in a religious setting, was when he was talking to Revolutionary Guard commanders. And the meaning he was giving, that God believes that the Revolutionary Guards is a holy, blessed institution, that it has the hand of God behind them, right? So to him, and I think he sees himself not as a grand Ayatollah, he really truly sees himself as the commander-in-chief of the Revolutionary Guards. He's a war commander. Even during this war, he saw himself as a war commander. Now, to understand Iran, where it goes from here, it's not really helpful to think theocracy. That's passé. That's Iran. That's Islamic Republic 1.0. You're dealing with an adversary, a man who thinks in national security terms. And when he sleeps and wakes up, it's national security issues and the way he's organized Iran around national security that drives him. So you have to understand how he's thinking, what his reactions would be. And so, to put it in that context, we have to sort of think of him very differently.
This is just a gentle reminder that we have finished the 10 minutes. So if you feel like you want to ask a question, please join in anytime. Before we get any questions from the audience, Professor Vali, you mentioned the 12-day war. On that note, you even mentioned the situation of hijab and other domestic matters that happened. It was very interesting how even after the 12-day war, we have seen a turn toward nationalism, where we saw the supreme leader directing the eulogist to sing A Iran, which is a very well-known let's say, anthem, in a more religious term. But there was a hint of nationalism to it. What do you think that implies about Iran's underlying grand strategic aims beyond the conventional terms that we're used to?
So I would say, first of all, in terms of these sorts of things, hijab, nationalism, the Islamic Republic is more pragmatic than, let's say, people in Washington understood. I remember so many of my colleagues in Washington would say, there is absolutely no way the Islamic Republic will take an inch, walk back an inch on hijab, because the Islamic Republic is about hijab. This is all about religion. But we see that it is not. And you have to go back when Ayatollah Khomeini was dying and he was trying to make sure everything worked. He said something important. He said that the defense of the Islamic Republic is more important than prayer, fasting, and Hajj. It's more important than the fara'id in Islam. So if it's more important than the fara'id, it means that it's more important than hijab. And so if it's threatened, the Islamic Republic's defense of Islamic Republic, and in the eyes of Ayatollah Khomeini and the regime, there is no difference between Iran and Islamic Republic. They don't see it that way. This talk that they would defend the regime, it's like anywhere in the world. There is always a regime. But people who are running countries don't think like they're an occupying power, and they have to defend the occupation versus the country. They see this as the country. And so the priority for the Islamic Republic is national security, right? And everything else, including Islam, hijab, these sorts of issues would be sacrificed or set aside for the survival of the state. Now, during Iran-Iraq war, one of the conclusions that all of the elite of Iran took from the Iran-Iraq war was that Iran survived for two reasons. One is that it has territorial depth, that the Iraqis could not reach Tehran, right, in the blitz of the war. They came so far, and then they stopped, and that allowed Iran to get back. And even today, they say in Iran that Iran's greatest advantage vis-a-vis Israel is its size of its territory. It's its territorial depth. The second strategic belief they had in Iran-Iraq war was that the population was committed to the war. Not to the war. It was committed to Islamic ideals. It was committed to ideology of the revolution. And that meant that the Islamic Republic sees its strategic depth in its people, right? And for many years, they thought that the people have to be ideological for them to perform this function. Now it has come to the conclusion that the people are no longer ideological. There is not a bond, they will not support a war in the name of revolution, like they did in the Iraq War. But they are on one page with the regime or with the Islamic Republic when it comes to Iran. Right? So the strategic depth now, during the Iran-Iraq War, the strategic depth with the people was around Islamic ideology. Now it will be around nationalism. It doesn't mean that before the 12-day war, the Revolutionary Guard commanders, etc., Khamenei did not see themselves as nationalistic. But they didn't feel like it was a good idea to be openly nationalistic. Now they realize that the Iranian people will defend their nation if it's under threat. And therefore now the bond that was between the state and the people, which was Islamic, now it's very openly nationalistic.
Since you spoke about the strategic depth, in the light of recent developments, where do you see that heading, and what do you think are Iran's strategic options when it comes to its strategic depth?
I would say that Iran, it's not shocking to say that Iran is in a very difficult space. For the reason that, first of all, the way it thought about national security, it has to rethink it. I mean, for a long period, the way, as I've said, Ayatollah Khamenei has established sort of the order in Iran and is protecting in Iran's independence, was that we will not talk to America, we will not normalize with America, but we also don't want war. Iran doesn't want to go to war with America either. So there was a balance Iran operated in, which in Iran they call no negotiations, no war, which actually he had said in a number of his speeches, that's the equilibrium he was maintaining. So, you go to the table for some tactical agreements like the nuclear deal, but no normalization. And how did Iran prevent war with the US? Was largely through the proxies and with Israel. I mean, today they have collapsed, right? Hezbollah, Syria, but it worked for 20 years. The reason that Israel didn't attack Iran 2 years ago, 3 years ago, 10 years ago, was largely because Iran had the capability of retaliating through Hezbollah. And so Hezbollah was really Iran's first line of air defense, if you were to say. Then Israel, through an intelligence and military coup, took down Hezbollah. So the situation of no war, no negotiation fell apart. There was war, right? And so now I think the inclination is for Iran to go back to that no war, no peace. But that requires Iran coming up with another kind of defense instead of Hezbollah, which largely I think is for them it's missiles and drones, to sort of give Washington and Israel second thought about war with Iran. But this idea of no negotiation, no war is not something that is popular with the Iranian public, right? I mean, defense of country, nationalism is one thing, but it's an open question whether you can sustain the kind of old equilibrium again. So I think there is a fierce debate in Iran about what to do and whether it's feasible. For instance, there is a fierce debate among the Iranians about the future of the nuclear program. Right now, there is a fierce debate. We can go into it, but I'll let you.
Where do you think that fierce debate is heading?
I think the core of it.
No,
well, the core of it goes to, I think everybody in Iran, right, left, hawkish, dovish, believes that Iran's nuclear doctrine was wrong. Because Iran has had a program for 20 years, let's say since 2003 till today, 22 years, that has been open. I don't mean open to inspection, but it's been open in the sense that Iran said, yes, we have a program, here are the places, the International Atomic Agency can visit with certain things. They said, we have a program, but we promise that it's not for military purposes. And Ayatollah Khamenei issued a fatwa that banning nuclear weapons. But this has not worked because the West, Israel, and even the United States, after negotiations with Iran, have never believed that this program intends to be civilian and it's going to be peaceful. So after 20 years, the question is, you should have either, like Pakistan, like Israel, like North Korea, you should have just gone and built a bomb from the beginning, a secret program. Or if you're not doing it, if you don't want a bomb, then just give it up, right? Because this kind of a program, this kind of a nuclear doctrine has been extremely expensive. The country has probably spent hundreds of billions of dollars building it. It has not had any economic dividend. There's no nuclear power plants, no major nuclear industrial efforts that benefit from this investment. It has brought more sanctions on Iran, which has been hugely costly to the country, and has now brought war to Iran, right? So the way Iran could be when Khatami was president, when Rafsanjani was president, yes, nobody liked it, it was enemy, but it was not this securitized, right? This degree of securitization since 2003 owes to the nuclear program. And I think Iranians say, well, this hasn't worked. So you either give it up, sit down and really negotiate with the US for serious sanctions relief for giving it up, or you actually go ahead and build a bomb. Now, ironically, after the 12-day war, the idea of a nuclear bomb is very popular in Iran. It wasn't before. I mean, even very modern Iranians, very secular Iranians, an Iranian university professor told me, my students want three things. They want a normal country that has relations with the West, they want economic prosperity, and they want the bomb.
Thank you so much. Unfortunately, I would have loved to have this conversation going, but we have reached the end of our discussion today. We gained a clear understanding of how Iran's grand strategy has evolved historically, and while taking present and current circumstances into consideration as well as the potential scenarios that it may take moving forward. On behalf of the Emirates Center for Strategic Studies and Research, I would like to thank you, Professor Vali, along with all of our audience, for your engagement in today's conversation. We look forward to welcoming you all again. Thank you.